Get out the insurance cards, get out the copays. The office is open, my friends. Brought to you by drroto.com.
What is up, and welcome in to another off-season edition. We are the One and Done Show. We are your fast break of college basketball information. I am your host. You can catch me on those Twitter streets at FantasyNav, and he is our ambassador of Quan. For my money, the hardest working man in terms of college basketball coverage, keeping you up to date with all things NIL, transfer portal, getting ramped up for the draft. And the captain of our ship, Mike Holland, MC Holland 34 on Twitter. Mike, how is it going tonight?
Yeah, man, I'm doing good. It wasn't 110 degrees today, so just a cloudy 99. So I guess that's better than nothing, right? But other than that, just trying to stay cool, and then just been working on off-season content. I just finished a piece that was posted on drroto.com about the top 10 players that we have ranked that withdrew from the NBA draft and returned to their respective teams. So you can look that up right now. Other than that, just been working on the big board, which is now 97% complete out of our top 100. We're just waiting on the final three players to make their decisions: Amani Bates, Pete Nance, Emmanuel Akot. So that'll officially close that part of the off season for me, which I am looking forward to. So definitely exciting times as we continue to move through the off season. Of course, I'm sure one of these guys will decide to withdraw and return back to their school, which will create another Mr. 100, but we'll see where that goes. But enough about that. Let's get to the exciting part of the show. That is to introduce our guest to cover a little bit of Pac-12 hoops here with us. He covers the Arizona Wildcats for Tucson.com. Please welcome Bruce Pascoe to the show. Bruce, how are you doing tonight?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me, guys. It's all settling down here finally, so we're in a good place.
Yeah, definitely fun and a little bit foreign to have a pretty clear picture of what teams are going to look like heading into next season. It'll take a little bit of adjustment, but like having that information on hand. Want to start off here with the Wildcats. Coach Tommy Lloyd did an absolutely amazing job in his first season, 33-4, won the Pac-12 regular season, got himself a nice pay increase coming off of a Sweet 16 appearance. And now his reward for all of that hard work are a number of his key players heading off to the NBA draft. So it makes a repeat feel kind of tough. So first question for you, how do you see Lloyd managing these expectations, and what does he need to do in year two for it to be considered a success?
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, because I think it's in a way expectation wise has been a good thing, because it kind of lowers them a little bit. Maybe almost to the point where they were last year, because last year they had a really good, talented young core coming back from that COVID year, but they fired Sean Miller, went to Tommy Lloyd. Tommy Lloyd had never been a head coach. Everybody said good things about it, but you never really knew. And then they were really, really good. So, now like you said, they've lost a ton of talent to the draft. And, there's a pretty good young core coming in, a couple good transfers, but there's a lot of uncertainty once again. So I don't know. I think the expectations might be slightly higher than they were last year, which they were pretty low last year. But they're still not going to be considered probably the favorites in the Pac-12 at this point. And so I think if he can get them pretty, at least to be competitive for the conference title and get them into the tournament, that would be a successful. I think that the expectations are low enough that I don't think people are going to expect they're going to go 33-4 again and get a number one seed. They just probably lost too much. I think they've recruited very well for 23, and they could be that good, overall in the long term. But I think they're looking at maybe a little bit of a dip here, and if he can steer them into still having a really good year, that'll be, definitely meeting or exceeding expectations.
Yeah. So just speaking of the Wildcats heading into the draft, what are NBA teams getting from these guys that are coming off the board here for these, obviously three guys that are coming out?
Yeah, well, I think Ben Mathurin, I mean, he's the, projected lottery pick. He's gotten invited to the green room. So, his stock is super high, and there's a reason for that. I mean, he probably could have left last year and been a first round pick. I mean, there was a lot of talk about him as explosiveness. He's super athletic, but also, you know, really, really good shooter. He's got a little ways to go defensively, especially, you know, just consistently on defense. And, you know, his mid-range game may need some, you know, some growth there, but there's a lot of good things about him. And, you know, I think he's going to go high and contribute right away. And then I think, you know, Christian Coloco and Dalen Terry were both guys at the beginning of the year you would not have projected to go in the draft, but Coloco kind of broke out, you know, right away, and he got an MVP in their MTE. They played in Las Vegas in November, outplayed Hunter Dickinson, and was like, you know, wow. I mean, just the things he could do. He had hit, you know, he's a developing 3-year player, you know, but really took off this year in his third year. He just defensively, he'd always been a rim protector type, but just, I think in Lloyd's system, really kind of excelled even more, really helped him. And he did some things defensively too, where he kind of grew to where he could handle switches really well. It wasn't unusual for him to be out there 7 foot guarding guys on the perimeter and, you know, shadowing them inside. It was just, you know, he really did a lot there. I think there's maybe, you know, a lot of questions defensively, but it certainly seems like at a floor, he could be a niche guy in the NBA with what he can do defensively. And Dalen Terry, I mean, he was a guy who tested. The other two guys went for sure. Terry tested the draft, but I think the thought was he was going to come back. But there was also a thought that this guy has so much upside that you never know, he could go. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, he averaged 8 points last year, but he played a really, arguably the second biggest role in the team. Certainly he was up there to top 2 or 3 or 4 players, as far as he brought a little bit of everything, you know, pretty good playmaker, you know, they're probably their best perimeter defender, and, you know, not a bad shooter, didn't shoot a lot, but, you know, and just brought a lot of different things. And I think what happened in the draft process is he showed a lot of that, not only in workouts, but he interviews well. He's a real personable guy. He's a lot of fun, and his measurables are off the chart. I mean, his wingspan is like 7'1" or something, I think. And he's just, you know, he's got just physical gifts, and you just can see him growing into being a guy who could be in the league for a long time. You know, he may need some development initially. He's still very young, but the upside there is really something.
Yeah, I love all the steam, you know, that Terry's creating right now. It feels like he's going to kind of go middle of the first round, and then Mathurin obviously really looking for him to do some big things at the next level. But, you know, Arizona received some great news going back to the roster coming into the 2022-2023 season. Got a couple of commitments from the transfer portal over the last week. First, you had Cedric Henderson from Campbell, then Courtney Ramey from Texas. Both are very good players that will obviously need to replace the losses of Mathurin and Terry. So what roles do you see for these two guys next year?
Well, I think Ramey kind of probably strikes me as the really guy they really needed. If they were going to have a really nationally competitive team, they needed that because he brings a lot of things that they lost with Terry, not, you know, shooting, but particularly defense. He gives them a perimeter defender they really need, and maybe some toughness too. I mean, one thing they've been talking about a lot around here is, you know, they struggled to beat TCU in the second round, and then they lost to Houston, got pushed around and lost in the Sweet 16. And Tommy Lloyd was one of the first to say, we need to get tougher. And he said he wanted to address it in recruiting as well as, you know, developing guys he had. And so, you know, maybe Ramey gives him a little bit of that as well. And I think secondarily, he is, you know, they're expecting him to play kind of shift over and play some point guard too, and be a secondary ball handler, which is key because not only did they lose Terry, who was a secondary ball handler, but they also lost Justin Kier, who was a super senior who played kind of a combo guard role off the bench. So they definitely needed some help there. And I think, you know, he's going to be really key, playing as many minutes as he can probably. And then I think with Henderson, you know, he's a bigger wing. He's, you know, obviously not a, you know, projected lottery pick like Mathurin, but, you know, he's a guy who can do a lot of things. He played kind of a small ball 4 at Campbell there in a low major situation. And, you know, he could play a 4 if he needed in the smaller matchups. And frankly, there are some of those matchups you're going to see in the Pac-12. So I could see him doing that, but I think mostly he'll be that bigger wing, probably off the bench, but again, probably going to get a lot of minutes and, you know, seems like a good guy, you know, certainly has a lot of experience, and that's going to be really key because they've got this mix of young guys, and then some of these transfers that are coming in, and if they can get the chemistry at all between those two groups like they did last year, it should bode pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this Arizona program could certainly do a lot worse than bringing in Henderson and Ramey to supplement or fill some of the gaps left in the roster. I want to carry the conversation forward about the guys that are returning. You've got Krisa, you've got Tubelis, you've got Larson, all of which are presumably going to play pretty critical roles in this upcoming season. So, wanted to know, specifically if this team is going to challenge for the Pac-12 again this year, which one of these guys do you see kind of taking the lead to get them there, or is there maybe somebody else on the roster who can rise to that occasion?
Well, I think Kirk Reese is kind of the emotional leader of this team, and he's a real scrappy guy. They call him Tommy Lloyd calls him swaggy. I mean, he likes to talk and gesture. He's a lot of fun. He's outspoken. He was doing the hand signals, when they beat TCU, and doing their hand signal and having fun with the fans there. And he's just that kind of guy. So, they kind of rally around him in that sense. Obviously, he's got the ball too, which is a big thing for a leader as well. But I think as far as pushing towards the Pac-12, I mean, Tubelis is already an all-league player. He tailed off slightly at the end of the year in the tournament, and it's since come out that he has a wrist injury, and they're not saying, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was bugging him towards the end of the last year as well. He also had a really bad sprained ankle at the end of last year, or towards the end of last year, that limited him. But if he comes back fully healthy, he's an all-league player. He's certainly not going to get any worse. He could get a little bit better. He's a good team guy. Likes to do, he just likes to win and be around guys. He's really pretty easy going off the court, actually, and so he'll be a factor. But I think Pelle Larsson, could be a guy that maybe not necessarily being the leader of the team, but I think his play. He came on last year. He broke a foot playing for the Swedish national team about a year ago, and then he came into the fall, missed pretty much all of fall practice, and came to took a while for him to really hit his stride. And I think over the last part of the year, he started to play better and better, and especially defensively, they were even putting him in to guard fours a lot of times. Even in some cases took Tubelis out, for defensive reasons, to guard a smaller forward, put Pelle Larsson in there. So, he has that ability. He'll be a third-year player. He started at Utah his freshman year, and then, played a key role off the bench here last year. I think he could be, a starter, and, he could push for an all-league type of deal as well. And if they get that from him, that certainly puts them in the mix. That helps put them in the mix for the conference.
Yeah, I really liked Larson's game last year. Obviously, Tubelis did tail off, but we saw what he did early in the season. So yeah. I think he can recapture some of that. Obviously, looking for a big year from him. But I got a comment here from Jay here saying Ramey ball's coming in hot. So saw a lot of that down here in Austin. But I wanted to ask you about this.
They need that.
They need that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll see how that transitions out to the West Coast. But I just kind of want to get your thoughts on the 2022 recruiting class that's coming in. It's a 3-man class, got some international flavor. You've got the 7-footer Dylan Anderson from, there in the state, but you've got 2 overseas guys. Philip, let me pronounce his name correctly. I believe it's Borovikinen.
Borovikinen.
Borovikinen, okay.
Yeah, that's what I've been told. I'm still learning it myself.
Yeah, for sure. And then Henry, I believe it's Visar, if I'm not mistaken.
And I just found out today Vasar.
So, all right, yeah, man. These are fun to learn, right?
Yeah.
How did Arizona become such a force internationally, and what are you expecting from this 3-man class?
Well, it's an interesting thing. It kind of goes back to Lowry Markkinen, who they recruited for the 16-17 season, and he blew up. They thought he was a 2-3-year player. He blew up and left after a year, became a lottery pick. It was like, wow. And Sean Miller said after that, and DeAndre Ayton was sort of international, but he was already in Arizona going to a prep school. But he made the comment that after that, they really decided to, make international more part of their plan. So they cranked that up a little bit. And then what happened in the fall of 2018, entering 2018, 19, 20, they weren't getting a lot of the 4 and 5-star domestic targets that they wanted. And that's probably, nobody will say it, but the big elephant there is that, this FBI NCAA thing had been hanging over them. So that made recruiting really tough. So they went to plan B. They cranked up international even more. And especially in 2020, when it was the COVID hit, there wasn't much of a roster, and Miller went out and he got Krisa, he got the Tubelis brothers, and and then he got he went to France. He got a couple of players that didn't always work out, but he ended up getting basically the core of the team that was what it was last year. He had Coloco, of course, the year before, but then you have all that. You have Sean Miller kind of pushing into international, and then he gets replaced by Tommy Lloyd, who's known for international recruiting and has basically been doing that for 20 years with Gonzaga. I mean, the story on him is that years ago, Mark Few told him as a young assistant, he says, go out and get a niche in international recruiting, because Tommy had an interest in that. He had, even as a kid, his parents had housed exchange students, and he'd always had this interest in international culture. So he was a really good fit for that. Developed at the Gonzaga, then came to Arizona, and which was relying more and more on internationals, and it was a natural, because not only could he add to that with this current team, but he took the guys like Kirk Risa, for example, who was coming back from Miller's team. Kirk Risa actually put his name in the portal in 2021, and he was like, and Tommy said, he told him, he said, Kerr, I'm the most international American coach you'll ever know. If you don't stay, you're crazy, or something like that. And sure enough, he stayed. And if you ask Kirk Risa, he'll tell you how much I think he enjoyed playing for Tommy and the season they had last year. So so in other words, he international, not only good at international recruiting, but knows how to relate to international guys, knows how to develop them, has a lot of respect internationally. So I think some of these kids, even back home in Europe or whatever, they know about Tommy. Their coaches know about him, and a lot of those federations and clubs don't like seeing their kids go to the U.S. to leave them, but if they do, it helps when they recommend. They've heard good things. They know that their players are going to be developed. So that's what's happening. I think more and more, you could see, I think Arizona teams going forward, and we saw it already, but it's going to be at least half and half international. He's got a couple of really good domestic players lined up already for 23, and he's in on a couple others, but international recruiting absolutely is going to keep playing a big part with this team.
Yeah, Tommy Lloyd, international man of mystery.
Yeah.
It was really interesting to see that progression, right? Arizona has kind of carved itself out a nice little specialization, and even with the transition over to Lloyd, still made that a point of emphasis. So I think it does give you a pretty unique edge there in the Pac-12. I want to zoom out a little bit more and talk about the greater landscape of college basketball. It is impossible to do that today without talking about NIL. So it's a new water that all programs are having to navigate. Can you tell us a bit about how the staff is handling and kind of thinking about NIL, and what sort of opportunities there are out there for Wildcat players?
Well, it's an interesting thing here, because again, there's so many international guys, and the thing with NIL is it's kind of a lot of gray area with international guys, because as the rules for student visas are such that you're not supposed to earn money, you're not supposed to have a job as if you're an international student on a student visa. So mostly they're getting they've defined it at Arizona, and I think a lot of schools have, where they say passive income is okay. If you're doing nothing and somebody's selling a jersey that has your name on it, you can make money off that. So there's some of that. There's some little. So basically, what I'm saying is it's not that big of a thing at Arizona with basketball, and that's a big part of the reason is the restrictions on internationals. There are two kind of collectives, so to speak, in town here that are, and one of which is strictly devoted to men's basketball. And what they're doing actually right now is they're actually trying to get memberships for $100. They have different levels, but I think they start at $100. And their model is they're hoping if they can get, say, 100 people or 1,000, I think whatever, 1,000, 10,000 people, putting in $100 each, and then literally that money is going to be just given to the players as part of their membership, and then they do appearances or whatever as part of that. But that's the goal they're hoping for. I don't think it's it's as it's NIL is a tricky thing. Like the coaches, at least as far as the rules go, they're not to be involved with that, and I don't think they are here. But it is out there. I don't think it's a huge deal. And Tommy Lloyd's been on record. I asked him about it recently, and he said, that's fine if there's some of that stuff, but there has to be an element that these players want to be here for college. They want to be here for that reason and be part of the collegiate environment. And so he's really not making a big deal of it. And I think his whole deal is, you come here, you're going to have a lot of fun and you're going to develop, and we're going to send players to the NBA, and we're going to send players to high level European leagues, and you're going to make a lot of money that way. I just don't think it's a huge deal here, maybe as it is elsewhere. And certainly as we're seeing with some of the football programs where it's maybe a little bit different deal.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of money being churned out here. So definitely an interesting viewpoint for the Arizona program. But, I want to look at the Pac-12 as a whole, right? There's a lot of love for UCLA, obviously, this offseason. Do you view them as the favorites? And what do you think about the conference as a whole coming into this year?
Well, it should be a little more like balanced at the top. I think probably there's 4 really good teams. I don't think Arizona will be picked. I think you got to go with UCLA just because, again, they've got so many guys back and they've got really good players coming in, as they often seem to do. And they kept Jaime Jaquez. He didn't even test the draft, which is a surprise. And they lost a couple of really good players, but again, they've got so much talent. And I think the one thing that's easy to forget about them is they were really good last year, but they had a lot of injuries and they had a lot of COVID issues, and they just weren't themselves most of the year. And I think UCLA was one of those schools, and this doesn't really get talked about much, but UCLA was one of those schools that had random COVID testing even last year, and not everybody had that. They didn't have that here. Like, you could be completely asymptomatic and test positive, which I believe happened to some of their key guys a couple of times, and then you're out for 5-10 days or whatever it is. And so they just basically were never the same. So I think, provided that's all past everybody, UCLA should be really good. USC's got a lot of guys back, and Oregon's done, they have a terrific roster on paper. Of course, they imploded last year with chemistry problems, and you never really know about that. When you get a lot of transfers in, sometimes the chemistry doesn't work out because everybody has their agenda. They transferred in because they want minutes and shots, and they don't get it, and they get pissed off or whatever, And that happened apparently at Oregon last year. And, but if that gets under control, and Dane Altman's been pretty good at, over the years, his track record's really good at getting guys to mesh together. They should be up there as well. And, there even some schools like Colorado, Stanford got a lot of key guys back that could be factors as well.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting watch. It always is in the Pac-12. We like staying up for those late games here, Central Time. So, finally, we're sitting here 140 days out. But early prediction for the Wildcats and how this roster came together.
Well, I have to preface that by saying as well were a lot of people, I was completely wrong about them last year. I picked them 6th in the Pac-12 because I just thought there's too many questions. I don't know if Kirk Reese can play point guard. I don't know if they have enough shooting. I don't know. About Tommy Lloyd, even though I've heard great things about him. I just thought, we gotta withhold judgment. So, and they proved to be better than, and they were picked 4th officially in the league, and then wound up finishing the year basically number 2, overall in the country. So that said, I mean, I think we have to be careful. But now we do have a track record. Again, they lost a lot of talent, as we were talking earlier. So I don't think they're going to be quite as talented, but they still have a fair amount of talent. And, they have a guy, one guy I haven't even talked about is Adama Ball, who's a wing from France that really came on in some spots. They didn't even use him much last year. He's a guy who could start or play big minutes and really develop into a key factor. So they do have quite a bit of talent, but I'd say overall, certainly a top 4 Pac-12 finish is possible. They could win the league. I wouldn't pick them to. I don't think I would at this point. I'd probably pick them 3rd, but and then they should be able to get in the tournament and maybe win a game or 2. I would think. They did that last year. They won 2 games, and I think the thought was they should have won more. They should have been a Final 14. But as we all know, matchups have a lot to do with it, and they had a really tough matchup playing Houston that 3rd game. There's no question about that.
Yeah, we covered the tournament in depth, and our favorite theme there was styles make fights, and that was a very tough out for the Wildcats there in the round of 16. Bruce Pascoe, thank you very much for spending some time with us this evening. For those of you that aren't already, you can follow Bruce on Twitter at Bruce Pascoe. It's scrolling along the bottom there. You can check out all of his amazing work over at Tucson.com. Bruce absolutely has his finger on the pulse of this Wildcats program. And Bruce, we appreciate you spending some time. It's been a really interesting conversation.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks, Bruce. So, Mike, like you mentioned off the top, there are far more names on your big board that have decided where they're going than are not. One of those names that most recently decided where he's going was your last guy in, number 100 on your board, and he's going to a program that we covered not that long ago. Tell us where the 100th guy, the last guy in, decided to play next season.
Yeah, Illinois transfer Jacob Granderson chose Duke. We actually talked about this about a week ago, needing some outside shooting. So you look at it here, it's going to be interesting to see what Duke's going to do, right? They're getting all this talented freshmen in. How is he going to fit in? You're going to need some floor spacing. It's a really young roster. He's an experienced player. Does he start? Does he come off the bench? Going to be interesting to see what John Shire does with the rotation here. But one thing that they were missing was obviously the outside shooting that they are losing with Banchero, AJ Griffin. So plenty of guys that can put the ball in the hole from deep are going to be gone. So definitely fills a need there for them. And it's going to be interesting to see, man. This Duke team is just, you never know, right? It seems like every year when they bring in so many different guys, it's just a wait and see approach. I think it'll be interesting for DFS purposes. They're going to play fast, but how does Granderson fit in? We're going to have to watch this and kind of see where his pricing comes in. But overall, I think obviously you're going to look at guys like Lively and Filipowski, Tariq Whitehead as kind of their cornerstones. And we talked about as the season goes with those guys is how they're going to finish. So, what are your thoughts on them bringing some of this outside shooting in with Granderson?
Yeah, I mean, at least from kind of the DFS angle, right? It's wait and see at best, right? I know from kind of the more macro X's and O's standpoint, kind of bigger picture basketball or real life basketball side, this Duke team, the Duke fan base has had their eye on Granderson for a while. So very happy to have him joining the ranks there and, shooting up some three balls at Cameron Indoor. But I mean, with just how deep this Duke team is and how they seem to always be, I don't see him getting enough run to potentially be on the radar. But I mean, if he comes in and he gets hot, he starts shooting like Seth Curry, then we could certainly be firing him up as we get a little bit deeper into the season.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely a team to watch. They always are, to see how that kind of shakes out and what adjustments John Shire is going to be doing in the replacement of Coach K. But the other big news that kind of dropped is, Dior Johnson from committing to Pitt. He was the number, I believe, 37 overall player on 24/7 composite ranks out of the high school ranks. Decommits from Oregon. Oregon obviously had a bunch of guards coming in. Will Richardson decided to leave the draft. They have Jermaine Cuisinart and Keyshawn Bartholomew coming over. They're both members of our top 100 transfer board. So obviously it's a great pickup for Coach Jeff Capel, who's actually had a lot of talent, but hasn't quite done as much as he should have. You're looking at him. He's probably going to need a pretty good year and just an interesting roster overall. They get John Hugley back. Nelly Cummings is coming over from Colgate. We kind of saw what he did in the tournament last year. A really nice shooter. So definitely an interesting get. He's got an interesting story. I think he played for almost 10 teams in high school. So he's moved around a lot. He was committed to 2 different teams at one point, for college. So, if he can just kind of, settle in here and, take over the point guard duties, I mean, he can score from all 3 levels, and he's pretty dynamic. So he's going to be an interesting follow in the ACC. Any thoughts on Pitt and the ACC?
I mean, this ACC is going to be an absolute murderer's row, right? So, I mean, undoubtedly, Coach Capel here has really loaded up on some pretty strong talent, at least guys that are, incremental, if not significant improvements from who they were trotting out starting last year. But I don't know if it necessarily changes their position. I think it'll be a very competitive Panthers team. It was really interesting to watch kind of the domino effect, right? You mentioned, the return of Richardson and that led Johnson to decommit from Oregon. These are the transactions that can absolutely make your head spin in the college basketball offseason. But in terms of the placement, my read's right along with yours, right? I expect to see Johnson, given his pedigree, given how much of a sought-after recruit he was, to plug right into this Panthers offense and be a featured part of what they trot out there. So definitely a guy to keep on our radar as we are gearing up for some DFS CBB. That's only a couple months out, a little bit better than 3 months. So each passing day we're getting closer, and the excitement is mounting.
Yeah, I can't wait, man. Can we just get through June and July? It's the dog days of summer here. But I think as obviously these rosters come to a close, we're going to be doing out some team previews here, some conference outlooks. Pitt definitely has an intriguing roster. Don't know how high they can get up in the ACC. Obviously, you got the two powerhouses that we talked about last week with Duke and North Carolina, and much improved Notre Dame team. NC State's got Jaquavian Smith coming back. That's our guy. So looking forward to big things with him, even though probably should have stayed in the draft, but that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, just looking forward to, getting these last couple of guys in the transfer portal set. And, obviously there's more names out there. There's over 1,400 guys in the transfer portal. So, just because you're not in the top 100 here does not mean you're not going to make an impact. And that's something that we're going to be diving into and, going to be coming up with a piece that guys that aren't in the top 100 that, may be making a pretty big impact or will have a high upside, for the year and for betting purposes and for DFS purposes. So all that coming down the chute as we continue to march through June and July. But anything else tonight?
Yeah, I was laughing over here at your omission of Miami from that ACC rundown, as there might be a cloud of uncertainty hanging over this program yet again. So, obviously a very talented roster. Presumably we'll see the vast majority of it available, and another potential contender there, at least a very stout team in the ACC. Other thing I wanted to touch on, teased it perfectly, right? A ton of guys still out there in the portal. We're not going to go quite as zoomed in on the guys outside of the top 100, but they will certainly get their due and their shine as we start to do some of these team breakdowns, as we start to preview where we think these teams are going to be ranked to start the year. So a ton of great content coming your way, including another one and done show, a very special edition coming up on Thursday, where we are taking our love and our followership for college basketball to the next level. We're going to be covering the NBA draft coming up. So much like everyone who subscribes to this channel, on Thursday, we're going to be talking about some dudes going to the big leagues, about to get this bread.
Thanks for stopping by the office. Get your fantasy prescription by subscribing to the channel and checking out drroto.com. And until the next visit, be well and take care.